Linux. What is Linux? Why is it important? Who uses Linux? Who should use Linux? And who shouldn't use Linux? Linux is a Unix-like operating system based on open source software and the Linux kernel. But let's go back a little bit. Back in the 80s, a gentleman named Richard Stallman set out to build a suite of software in a way that was unheard of at the time. He wanted software to be freely available to those who needed it. So GNU was born. GNU software is a collection of software composed of free and open source software. The philosophy of creating software, sharing it with other developers, allowing them to modify it and publish their own versions, was written and published as the GNU Manifesto. At the time, Stallman was working at MIT AI Labs. He resigned from his position so that he could develop the GNU project without a conflict of interest. The GNU operating system had to be written almost entirely from scratch, with the exception of a few existing compatible free software components. The adoption of GNU tools led to the family of operating systems built upon the Linux kernel, now commonly referred to simply as Linux. But what makes an operating system? Operating systems are just a collection of programs that let you accomplish tasks with a computer. Some of the key components are the kernel, package manager, and desktop environment. The kernel is the technology that speaks directly to the computer, and is the core of any operating system, and is responsible for controlling all devices connected to the system. Prior to Linux, all kernels in use were held by corporations and virtually unattainable to the common user. Linus Torvalds created the Linux kernel in 1991, and it was quickly adopted into the GNU operating system. A distribution is a packaged form of Linux that delivers everything one would expect from a typical operating system, usually differentiated based on its choice of package manager and its own flavor of a given desktop environment. Various enterprises or communities develop and maintain the distributions based on their own needs. Each distribution maintains their own philosophies and guidelines, some maintaining a 100% open source package, others allowing a combination of open source and proprietary software. There tends to be a close association with the desktop environment and distributions. When people look at a distribution, they are often primarily looking at the desktop environment. Some distributions only officially support a single desktop environment, or some heavily customize a particular desktop environment. The truth is, desktop environments are just a bit of software that is entirely separate from the rest of the distribution. It is possible to use different desktop environments within the same distribution. Why is it important? Linux drives many enterprise servers, as well as countless devices. The availability of the source code allows developers to polish their skills in a universal system, and enterprises are able to benefit by adopting systems that have been polished by a community of developers. Small device manufacturers are able to use Linux and customize the operating system to serve the purpose of the device without having to build an operating system from scratch, or pay the licensing for an outdated proprietary solution. So, who uses Linux? Well, everyone uses Linux, though many may not be aware of it. Whether you're using one of the popular internet services run on a Linux server, using an Android phone, or just looking at a screen at the airport terminal, you've probably used Linux. For many years, Linux was considered an impractical option for everyday desktop use. It was reserved for the tech-savvy. While this still may be the case, devices like Chromebooks and Steam Decks are thrusting Linux into the mainstream desktop space. Outside of those, modern Linux desktop environments have become extremely user-friendly, and more apps are becoming available on the various distributions. So who should use it? Well, anyone who wants to break away from the comfortable worlds of Windows or Mac OS. Diving into the world of Linux will change the way you interact with your computer, and may invoke a passion for software you didn't know you had. Almost any bit of software is either compatible with Linux, or there's a free and open source version available on Linux natively. However, many professionals in a specific field may have fine-tuned their skills in a software that is only available on Windows or Mac OS. Or worse, their employer may require that they use a specific software suite or the operating system included on a company-supplied device. There is no denying the positive impact Linux has had on the world. But should you use Linux? Yeah, you probably should. At least that's what the cool kids are doing.